Morning to you. Today is Monday, 23rd of March, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. This week, I'm walking through how the advisory board operating system works in practice. Right. So the past 2 weeks, I presented the model, I mentioned how it works, etc. But today we are going to go into practicalities, things that you can implement after this live session. So this is not a theory deck, is a board tool. A board tool, and it can happen and can work for executive teams too, and for founders. So let's go into the model. I'm going to put it on the screen so you can see it. So this is a model. This is a whole operating system. It's an ecosystem, as I call it, because actually founders, boards, executive teams, they are very tunneled, very funneled in the things that have to be done. And sometimes this is very hard to do. Look what happened in the past 3 weeks. The geopolitical environment changed. Whatever you planned in Q4 already changed. And today is the 23rd of March. So we are literally a week away, or 6 working days for month end and quarter end. One of the biggest events in the year, to not only to capture what's happened so far, how things change, and also how to start to do the next steps in terms of Q2, Q3, etc., etc. So it's a very challenging time of the year, a very challenging times overall in terms of the world situations. So we are going to look into the first stop on the model or the operating system, which is brands, people, and partnerships. So I'm going to highlight this portion so we are not distracted with the rest. This is mostly for the commercial acceleration. And there's a lot involved here because actually it seems that many things are very well thought, very capable people, but as I mentioned last week, they are fragmented. They are not working together as a whole in the overall scheme of things, as you say. And scheme, if you're looking in the US, scheme, it doesn't mean a scam. Scheme is like a system, if you may. Right. Okay. So let's look into this right now. So today I will start with scale, as I mentioned, is at the top of the model because this is where many companies look stronger than they really are, right? And some of you will be thinking, we are growing, so the model must be working, so your model. But unfortunately, this is a trap. It's like the tree that doesn't allow you to see the forest. So a business can grow and still become less governable, less investable, and less transferable. And here's a few words that you want to start to capture and make a jot there somewhere. Investable and transferable, because I'm going to mention these words further down in our conversation today, because these are the things, this is all the landscape change that is happening as we speak. Investors, stockholders, and inclusive of the institutions, like I'm going to mention Bank of England today, they are looking into these kind of things. Are these business investable? I say, well, that happened all life. That's what, but this is a change that is happening. It's transferable, it's scalable. Where is the bottlenecks? Is founder or executive teams dependent, or is a stellar board that actually, if this board changes, what will happen with the business? So some people confuse founder dependability or founder bottleneck or founder dependencies with just one person or two people. But sometimes you have stellar boards in your pitch decks. And if that stellar board is gone, that dependency is start to be noticeable right away, because you start to see the decline in terms of attraction for investors, institutions, or finance institutions, or your stockholders, that they go like, what's going on here, right? So when we say founder dependency, we are not talking about X person. We are talking about several things. Like, look what happened with Starbucks when they changed the CEO. Now, if the stock skyrocketed in Starbucks when the new CEO came into place, or when Steve Jobs left Apple and then came back. So These dependencies sometimes are good and sometimes are bad. The big majority are bad. And bad, I don't mean like a negative way. It means actually it start to create more risks, concerns that actually opportunities. So here's where I come as a board advisor. I build a rotating international advisory board around the milestones in front of the company, right? So what we have to do. So you get the specialist capability you need in a fraction of the time. It takes no hire. It doesn't take one stellar executive hiring to move the needle, as I say, without the consulting overhead and without the talent locked in and with the members swap every 6 months as the project evolves. These are the advantages and disadvantages that you have when you don't work with an international advisory board. And when I say international advisory board, is because today, more than ever, international perspectives, views, and point of experiences and expertise are coming very relevant. And you say, well, we are a local company here in the UK. We only deal with people inside our territory. It's true. But the tendencies, look what's happened with the distribution in terms of retail. The things are flooding from everywhere in the world into the UK territory. It does happens in Europe, happen in the US, happen in Latin America, happen everywhere in the world. Some of these distribution centers in China have 1 million items, 1 million items shipped per day. And you think that an international impact is not affecting your organization today? I probably look into that very carefully again, because if that is happening to clothing, for example, or certain small things like pens or devices, etc., etc., imagine what will happen with your own business when the things start to get more accessible because the distribution networks are more efficient, are more cheaper, the customs are more understood how it works, so they can come through customs much faster and much cheaper. So these international advisory boards are very important. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at three problems to consider when you're scaling. That problem number one is, and the first one is the risk on the founder's dependency. And I mentioned all that already, as dress up as a momentum, right? So we say, oh, we have this amazing board or executive team or founder that is a big momentum in our company. So the revenue rises, the calendars are filled in, but too many critical decisions still run through one or two people or a board. This is the growth plateau paradox, right? Where revenue stalls or workload rises because the founder becomes the decision bottlenecks. And when I say founder, remember it's executive teams and also boards. You have a second problem, and this is coming from statistics. The external evidence points in the same way are pointing to this. So the Office for National Statistics in UK found that firms with a management practice score below the median were 4 times more likely to use little to no analysis in important business decisions, right? So let me phrase this again. I'm using the UK National Statistics Office, but I'm 100% sure that your country, your geography have some similar kind of statistics in terms of what are the median of the management practice in terms of analysis for important business decisions. So if you are below the median, you are already at risk. So weak management discipline is called, does not stay hidden for long. It shows up in productivity, in judgment, in quality, and resilience. And last not least, another problem that I identified that is very evident, and I'm using the UK code, that provision 29 that is applicable from January this year, 26, and it sharpens the focus on succession, audit, risk, and internal controls. And again, internal controls. And at the same time, again, the British Business Bank says smaller businesses are using less external financing. And the Insolvency Service also highlights in the last 9 months of 2025 were above 2024 levels of risks, which was at the highest of the last 30 years. So why I'm using these statistics and say I'm confused. What are you talking about? This is the risk of the founders, executive teams, and boards. So in other words, imagine this. The boards, the executive teams, and the founders think scale needs a bigger engine. Yeah, let's do it more powerful, more torque, more horsepower, etc., etc. But the scale problems are the gearbox problems, right? So you cannot transfer that power to the wheels, right? So the transfer of that power is weak. So you need the structures, and these structures are coming from three things I mentioned here, which is your brands, your people, and your partnerships. And we're going to develop this right now. So here's the real question. If harder work is not the answer, so we need more power, what does a board or executive team and founders need to redesign so growth stop depending on one people and start working like a system? And here's the first keyword that I mentioned. I mentioned one already, transferability. This one is systems. So as a board advisor, and I'm going to develop this now, what I would propose to consider is the following. Through the asset lenses, and this is very important because people say, well, what assets? And remember that since the 70s to now, the biggest companies have around 93 to 95% of their value is an intangible assets. In other words, intellectual property. So through the lens of assets, and remember that it's not the tangible, so it's the intangibles, and an international advisory board operating system like the one model that you have on the screen here, you have to consider brand, people, and partnerships. Brand is a commercial story that earns trust and premium position, right? So it's the commercial story what you tell to your people and to your customers and network and suppliers, etc. That's part of the brand. It's everything. People are whether the right judgment sits in the right roles with enough succession depth. And here's the key. We mentioned boards, executive teams, and founders, and all of them are stellar and they are amazing doing the job that they do. But be careful, because actually everything is depending on them. If it's depending on them for every decision or strategic thing that had to happen, then you have a problem there. And actually investors and transferability and systems are compromised there. And this is the keywords I'm going to mention later on. And in terms of partnerships, they are about the growth compounding through distribution, trust, and capability beyond the firm itself, right? So these are your referrals. These are your worth, the transferability of the capacity to people to recommend you, and also to do partnerships in terms of how they build and grow with you in terms of innovation. I'm going to mention a case here because it's quite interesting. So the system makes the sequence explicitly as a scale milestone. What I'm trying to say with this is actually, if you isolate these things and you fragment your people, your brand, and your partnership, your distribution, your resellers, your ecosystem of partners, etc., then you have a problem because it's all fragmented, right? It's not working together towards very specific activities, which is scaling. Now, and I mentioned fragmenting last week, so if you want to learn more about how this looks fragmented, I have a full video last week about this. So the root cause here is the blindness that you have when the things are fragmented and not working together. So leaders deploy strategies that mirror their own personality, right? So the board's personality. So what is the collectively board, what they think about something, and they transfer that. And the teams are growing collectively in different ways and different profiles and different capacities. But mirroring to the board or to the executive team or to the founder, then you start to see that the model is not to restructure unique value activities, right? Because the people are in a different direction. Build profile aligned roles and use an ecosystem strategy that automatically attracts opportunities to the brand and your people. And here are some stats to consider that I mentioned earlier. This is very important because actually this shows how the fragmented systems actually doesn't allow to see you the things that are going around in your environment. And I mean the environment and being around the different organization what's going on. And this is coming from the Innovate UK State of Innovation 2024 report. And these signals that they are showing what's going on. In 2024, we don't have the stat 25, but at 24, 39% of firms reported collaborating with other organizations for innovation and analysis. This analysis showed that lifting smaller firms' collaborations to the levels of larger firms could unlock a further 150,000 innovative businesses. That tells boards something useful. Partnerships are not decorative. They are part of a how scale happens faster and with less internal strain. See, 39% of firms reported collaborating with other organizations for innovation. They scale at levels of larger firms, right? 150,000 in UK. This is UK statistics. But if you look into other organizations, look into the statistics of your country, what's going on there. So what that means, that if your organization is stalling today, look around with whom you can partner for innovation. And innovation doesn't mean making a big splash in the market. Sometimes innovation, and this is one of amazing definition of innovation, is 3-4% difference of whatever you're doing today. So, for example, a partnership in terms of distribution, and this is something I've seen happening in real life, how a company that was distributing locally, they start to redistribute regionally and then start to distribute nationally, doing partnership with local distributors. So they network distribution and say, well, this is known, yes, but how many are doing it? And how many are doing it correctly? Because then you start to see, well, I don't want to share the business with other guys, so then they're going to steal it from me. You find partnerships that actually are very solid, very good, and grow together. So that sounds sensible, right? But the boards, executive teams, and founders do not pay for sensibility, they pay for execution. So what do you do when you need that capability now, not after slow executive research, like finding the right talent for these kind of things? So I'm going to simplify this right now. So what do you do, or what do you gain working with me? So it's three things. You gain outcomes, differentiators, and risk reduction. In terms of outcomes, I build a rotation international advisory board around this scale milestone. So bringing in the exact mix of people, succession, and partnership capability needed to turn founder-centered growth into repeatable commercial scale. Right? Repeatable is the other word that actually I want you to highlight today. Repeatable, transferability systems, and which is the one, predictability. So you get the expertise faster than hiring one executive, and you do so without incurring fixed costs too early. In terms of differentiator, I do not drop in with broad advice and leave the boards, executive teams, and founders with more notes than movement. I install an operating rhythm. That means milestone scorecards, a sharper investor narrative, role clarity around unique value activities, ecosystem mapping, and a board level challenge tied to transferability and value creation. Meaning that actually investors, stockholders, and institutions lending money are going to look at you as a low risk organization because you are repeated business, you are transferable, you are systemized, you have less dependency on key people in your organization, even if they are important for the organization, and transferability is very important in terms of valuation because they know that this can be transferred to other people because they already have the blueprint, what they have to do and how to do it. So your proposal valuation logic is clear on this. Investors price the risk and value rises as risk is removed. What I mean with this is actually they start to see your organization less risky and more valuable. So then I say, oh, we like to invest on your organization. You are doing a round, we are listening. Instead of you're doing a round and thank you very much, not interested. In terms of reducing risk, I put the teams of the advisory board as the projects evolve. So every 6 months we change the people what the specialties are needed today, not paying for consulting overhead or generalist, or not locking people into capabilities that in 6 months' time they are not going to be needed anymore. Right. So this is pretty much the advantages, risk reductions, and outcomes that you get. So very specific. One action you can take today, if you want, and it's doable in 30 minutes or less, list the 5 commercial decisions that still depend on one person. Then tag each one as a brand, people, or partnership bottleneck, right? So it is a brand bottleneck for us, is a person bottleneck for us, or a board or executive bottleneck, or a partnerships. Do we have the right partners to scale with less effort and more efficiently? So let's pause it here for today because it was a lot, and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I'll move from scale to predictability, simply because a business that can grow and still confuse the board or the teams or the founders in terms of margins, capital, and asset quality is not scaling safely at all. And what I'm trying to say here is very simple. You will have a very shallow foundation, meaning that actually you can scale, but actually the building will move because you don't have this foundation very well set. So if you are a board member, a chair, a non-executive director, an executive team, or a founder, and you want to implement this advisory board operating system through international advisory board members faster than hiring one executive, without the consulting overhead and without talent locked in, and with the freedom of refresh expertise every 6 months or so, set up a 30-minute call so I can understand your position now for a scale diagnostic on your transferability blockers, bottlenecks, gaps, and ecosystem risk, so we can clear that out and make your company more valuable, more transferable, and more systemized, that attract capital faster than flagging risk. Now, have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.